Okay, hello everybody. I'm keeping Mike and JJ in the waiting room for a minute here. Um, Introducing tonight. This is a new thing for us. We have a guest. We have a victim, and I hope everyone's got alcohol because you're probably going to need it. So tonight we have plans, but you know how those go. And hello, Anarchy Monkey and Elizabeth McLean. I'm in Facebook jail. So if you could share this link to people you might think are friends of mine and Mike's, so that they know to come, because Facebook decided that me hyperbolically talking about my stomach pain, where I said I guess because I said literally, but when you say literally, you don't mean literally. I mean, Facebook, get with the program. So I said I literally want to disembowel myself, which would be a fucking metal way to commit suicide, because my intestines hurt apparently, and they suspended me for a day for making a suicide threat, which is just lovely. If they think you're suicidal, they're like, great, you're suicidal, so we're gonna isolate you from all your friends. That's wonderful, Facebook. Good job. I can guarantee you I would never disembowel myself. That does not seem like a particularly effective way. I mean, I'm sure it would work, but no, thank you. All right, I'm going to be bringing on Mike and JJ, and we've got questions while we drink and know things. Okay, let me see if I did this right. Let me pull this scene up. Yay! I need to scoot over. There we go. And I got my Pink Floyd shirt on. Is everybody's sound working?
What?
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So,
can you hear me?
Yep. And everyone knows
you
Mike,
want to?
so. No. So everyone knows
That
Mike,
figures.
but I'd like to introduce JJ. You guys probably already know, because, you know, my inner circle's pretty incestuous. But JJ's the badass
That's
parliamentarian who I needed the clip, who wrote the opinions, opinions, I guess is what you'd call them, on the LNC list that, saved me and put libertarians to shame over due process, which, should never have been necessary. But we owe you a debt of gratitude. Who knows who would have been in there right now? Well, we all know who was eyeballing that seat, right? Mike?
Your seat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The artist formerly known as Richard. Yes.
Yep. We all know that. But okay. So let's the plot thickens, JJ. The plot thickens.
Okay.
Thickens, curdles.
Yeah. Richard was going to originally run against me when I ran last term. And you would hope it was because he thought he would do a great job as secretary. He really wanted to be secretary. No, he wanted the officer title, which is the shittiest reason in the world to run for something, because you want a fucking title, especially if you're a libertarian. But alrighty. First thing we're going to talk about, though, is what I originally wanted to get JJ on to talk about, but he said it was super boring. It would only take a couple seconds, but I don't believe that. And that's actually working as a parliamentarian. And just as a segue, well, a rabbit trail, I guess is more the proper word. I got the email from the National. I say NAP because it drives Richard Brown crazy.
Me too.
Yeah. So I got this email from NAP, and I asked them, can you unlock another section? I'm waiting for 2 grades. And they thanked me for my patience and said no. And I'm like, don't thank me for something I'm not giving, because I am not patient. This is taking entirely too long. This isn't working. This is not working. No. But anyway, so JJ, how long have you been doing this kind of thing? And what are the kinds of organizations you work? I don't know. Just give us some stuff. I don't even know what to ask, because I've never, besides Richard Brown, and Richard, I really only get to talk to, generally we're at a convention or something. But I've never really met a working parliamentarian before. I've only met wannabe parliamentarians like me and Mike.
Yeah, how'd you go from cracking open a Roberts to making it a full-time profession.
Okay. Well, first, I would like to thank you for having me here. And as you know, I do enjoy the show. And if I can, I want to say hello to my girlfriend, Kim, the first thing. Okay?
And I got to talk with her about the hair.
Yeah, I have told her if she dyes her hair pink, I'm running away screaming. Her daughter dyed her hair pink at one point, so that was
nothing a tranquilizer gun won't fix. Okay, continue.
Okay. I think with most parliamentarians, at some point we are involved in an organization, and we are inspired by something. Somebody does something wrong, and we want to try to fix it. Karen Ann, I think that was pretty much your experience.
Well, I got my ass kicked.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You look at this thing and say, this isn't right. That's how you really get involved with it. I started getting involved with it in college. I was in our student government, and I ended up being the parliamentarian of our student senate. That's where I began to really study Robert's Rules, and the first thing that I picked up was the 1893 edition. And then I moved on to the 1915 edition, like just about everybody else. I was not using the absolute correct version of Robert. But that's where I started to become involved in it, and I became much more heavily involved in it when I discovered that there was a professional organization. And when this organization that I was a member of, I watched really, really try to take action against somebody totally inappropriately. Basically, the president just said, "Okay,
anything about that,
okay,
but
you're out." Okay, the president, I'm still a member of it. In fact, I'm a life member of it. But the president said at the time, basically, "Okay, you're out. You violated executive session, so we can kick you out." The answer is, yeah, you can kick them out, but you need to actually have a trial, and you can't declare an executive session unless you're actually in a meeting. That's a little bit of a problem. So that's where I became a problem with it. I wrote them, didn't hear any response. And I thought, I'm interested in this. Is there a professional organization that does this? And I looked it up, and I think the World Almanac, believe it or not, this is 1980s. Okay, well before the internet. And I saw at the time two organizations, the American Institute of Parliamentarians and the National Association of Parliamentarians. And I noticed in getting the current copy of RONR, which at that time was the 1981 version, it said that one of the authors at the time, William Evans, he's since passed away, was the former national president of the National Association of Parliamentarians. It said that that Henry Robert III, the guy who you don't think ever had sex, apparently, well, maybe I don't even have any kids. Obviously his ancestors did.
There could have been asexual
maybe he was
reproduction.
adopted.
Like
No, there is a resemblance. He was not adopted, but let me see if I can. Let me phrase this. He got me going off track, but which is going to happen all night. But basically, I noticed that in the flyleaf, he had been the parliamentarian of the National Association of Parliamentarians.
Oof.
So I figured.
Ay. That's a nightmare position.
I figured somewhat wrongly, and again, because I'm in both, that this must be the more official organization. So I thought, why don't I join to find something out about it? And they said, well, you have to take a test. So I thought, well, that's not going to be too much of a problem. And I took the test, and that's how I got in. Now, at the same time, parallel to all this, I'm involved in local government. So all of this stuff is coming in handy. And I'm using it. So that's basically where I got involved in it. And I think I've been a member of NAP since 1987, and I've been a member of AIP, which also had some of the same people in it. It just didn't have it on the flyleaf, since 1994. So that's how I got here.
Okay, but how did you turn it into a full income-making job?
I retired, so it's not full income making. I do. I have a. I used to be a welfare caseworker, believe it or not, and I retired from that due to disability, and that's where I get most of my money. But I still do this consulting on the side. So it's basically through word of mouth, something like this, being in the referral services of both AIP and NAP, doing articles, because sometimes people will go through, look and see articles, and they'll say, wait a minute, this guy's dealt with this. Let's ask him about this. So that's basically, and I could probably do a lot more advertising, and I don't.
So what's like some organizations you worked for, some interesting like things?
Okay. Well, let's see. I did the Cheney University Alumni Association.
Cheney University?
Cheney University.
Is that Dick Cheney or Lon Cheney?
Neither. It's actually one of the oldest. It's actually considered a Black Ivy.
Okay.
I did, let's see, I've done a chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, Zeta Phi Beta, a region of Zeta Phi Beta sorority. I'm trying to think of some other more national organizations that I've done. Several times
even local stuff. I'm just really interested in the type of like organizations that hire parliamentarians.
Okay. Generally, they hire a parliamentarian for for one of three reasons. They want to do something, they don't know how to do it, they have a large organization, they see the value of it, or they basically just screwed up and they want to figure out how to unscrew it. Okay, I get a lot of those as well. But this can be anything on a local level, from housing cooperatives, condo associations. I do a lot of dog clubs. They tend to have a lot of people involved in parliamentary procedure. They tend to be very, very contentious. They can be real bitches.
No, actually, I can believe that. Having heard some of the stories from my mother-in-law with her Dalmatian breeding, and from other people with whippets and so on, yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. They are. Take a little bit of water here. I actually have a canteen filled with water, and that's what I cool it, and that's what I drink out of.
Oh, but see, at the last
probably
Libertarian
juice potion.
Convention, we had a lady walking around with a purse full of vodka. She had a vodka purse with a spigot on it. It was the baddest ass thing I've ever seen.
I can confirm that.
No, mine's just tap water. I just keep it.
It wasn't the greatest vodka, but I can confirm it.
Okay. But basically,
I'm drinking my beer tonight, root beer.
A lot of times it is national professional organizations. I've done the American Association of Blood Banks. That was one of my earlier clients. I'm trying to think of just some of the things off the top of my head where I've done them. Of doing those kind of clients for a meeting. I also get people who want bylaws done. And one of the ones that I did probably the most recently was Franklin and Marshall University in Pennsylvania. Sometimes it runs from everything from a local church to a national organization. I have done I did the initial bylaws for Faith and Deliverance Ministries in Philadelphia. Pastor Nash, that is a shout out to you. I'm sure you won't be watching this because it is too R-rated, but yes. I'm not a member of the church, but I did their bylaws for them.
Have you done any political organizations?
Yes. I will not talk about the famous coup, except to say that I did it there. I did do, for example, the Haverford Township Republican Committee.
Oh,
I did some advice for another Republican committee, which was in Delco. I have done, and I think I can basically say this at this point. I advised a candidate who eventually became a member of Congress, to how to guide him through the nomination process, which was done. It was a vacancy, and it was done by an election. And that one it came out of central Pennsylvania, and from what I've heard, it is still legendary.
do people tend to specialize from other parliamentarians, like in certain types of organizations?
You have a lot of people that will do things exclusively for dog clubs because there are so many dog clubs. There tend to be, I try specifically not to specialize, but I usually get a call if it's a political organization or if somebody wants to overthrow a government. Seriously.
Hey, I'm down with that.
Yeah, you are not the only one who in the last week has requested the article on the art of the coup d'etat. Okay, let me just, I will say that. I will say that. Sometimes.
And for the NSA folks who are watching this, be cautious. You don't know what we're thinking.
I'm sure they already know. They
well,
might even say
I'm on all kinds of lists.
yes, they might even say thank you at this point. As I like to say, if I am going to be part of a coup in the United States Senate, it will be more successful and less violent than the supposed one we had last January. Okay.
Well, you got to wear the bison ears.
I didn't even have to leave the house for that. So that was.
Oh my goodness.
That was just a clown show.
Probably in a couple of years, I'm actually going to start talking about that because that was interesting. Yeah. If you want, I'll come back on and I'll kind of go over it. But I'm trying to think. Some people will not do certain things. Disciplinary actions. A lot of people just will not take them. Coup d'etat, something like that, a contentious meeting, a lot of people will not take them. Personally, I try to shy away from presiding. I don't enjoy doing it. If it's a regular organization that I've been doing in and out as a parliamentarian and they say, well, we need a professional presider, I'll say, well, okay. I will usually try to talk them out of it at least for a few minutes. Sometimes it's better to use a professional presider, but I generally do not like to force it. I always leave that decision, or I always believe that decision should be left with the chair. If he doesn't want to do it, okay, I'm not going to force him.
And trying to think of what else. Excuse me. I had on that. Do you know very many people who actually do that type of work full time, or is it more of a part time thing?
It's more of a part time. In Pennsylvania, everybody's part time. You do have one lawyer, actually two lawyers who do it part time, and you know one of them.
I do.
Yes, you do. Moulton.
Oh, he's working as a parliamentarian?
He is still listed, as of the last time I checked, he is still listed as doing that. Now, I will say this, he is not active in the state organization. Okay? I'm the old guy that's been around forever, the past state president. He's never been active. But I do know that he still maintains his credential, and you have to have some activity in order to do that. So, yeah.
Chuck pulled a very interesting, you could call it a coup with the Portland massacre. I don't know if you know, Mike, that Chuck was the architect of that.
No, I didn't know.
I did not know that.
There might be a paper in that. So
yeah, but let me tell you one of the reasons why I respect Chuck so much. Chuck was the architect of that, but he saw some things being done by some of his fellow conspirators, whatever you want to call them, that he didn't think was on the up and up. And he turned the evidence over to people hostile to what he was trying to do because it was the principle to him. That's how I got the voting records, Mike, of all those people, because he knew that I wanted to investigate it. And he's like, I won, but I wanted to win fair and square, and there's something not right here.
Okay.
And Chuck has always been that way as far as I've ever known him. Yeah, because there were votes that were just like the people who wrote the old platform that got replaced, that were in love with the old platform, were on record as voting to delete it. And it's like, he was like,
Okay.
that seems a little weird. I'm still trying to track down George Squire. I don't know, he's off in Barbados or something, but I've confirmed about 4, and 4 doesn't sound like a lot, but the fraction of the wins was under 1%. And I've already confirmed 4 wrong votes, but it's 10 years later. Nothing can happen. It's just a matter of curiosity at this point. But that was super, super interesting.
Oh, by the way, I do have to commend you on something, and that was closing the back door.
Oh, yeah, that was bad, wasn't it?
That was big. That was
Now,
big.
that was interesting, and I don't think I'm going to be revealing anything secret when I say this, but as you know, Richard Brown, who is a fantastic parliamentarian and a friend of mine, do talk. And one time he was asking me before this happened, he said, would it be possible to do this? He had identified it. I don't know if you had been involved in it or if he had identified it or whatever the situation was. And I remember saying, yes, you can do it, and I've done it.
Well, it's been tried. The last time it was tried, it's been tried multiple times, but the last time I'm aware of is in 2008. And the parliamentarian at that time advised the chair that you couldn't do it. And
yeah, that was in Denver.
Yeah, in Denver. And I wasn't there. I'd like to review the tapes. I think the chair disagreed, but the body just, they went into an uproar. Like they lost their minds, as they should.
Little convention, the body lost their minds, but that's another story.
Yeah, and so I was on the bylaws committee in 2018, and I put in that proposal to the bylaws committee. And some of the architects of what happened in 2008 flat out said to me, no, we're not going to pass this because we want to leave that option open. I was like, oh, really? It's funny because the deal I made was with Joe Bishop Henchman, which is so funny now. So Joe Bishop Henchman was the chair of that bylaws committee. There was something he wanted to get passed. And it also dealt with the statement of principles. And I opposed it. And he knew that the minute I talk statement of principles, I turn on the rocket boosters, I get everyone throwing chairs. So he didn't want me to speak against his proposal. And I said, I wouldn't feel so bad about your proposal if I knew the statement of principles was protected. So how about you switch your vote and you let mine be heard? Just let it be heard. And I won't oppose yours. And we made that deal. And that's how it got heard. Of course, he could only do so much. It was still ranked like number Q because it had so few votes. But then we got someone to get up and move to suspend the rules, to move it forward. But that was a collaboration between Joe and I.
Okay, well that was something that I think showed a great deal of foresight, and that you brought it up, that it was and that it was done because there was a back door there.
Right,
I know that
there was an attempt.
I have to commend you on it.
There actually was an attempt in St. Louis in 2010 to try to use that back door to go in, drop the 7/8 back down, remove the 7/8 majority, and then turn around and then put it back.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
No, but this attempt was not to double lock it. This was an attempt to throw all the locks away so they could delete the SOP.
Oh, this time they just...
And that one, I was there in St. Louis, and we said, hell no.
Yeah,
it
died in
a
was
massive
to
fire.
Delete the Dallas Accord language and then lock it and double lock it. Put the force field.
That's kind of what they want to do in St. Louis without the double lock, yeah.
But here's what's
people
funny.
Are like, no.
The conspirators in that one overplayed their hand. There's a lot of people in the party who hate the cult of the omnipotent state language. I don't. But let me tell you, if I was there in 2008 and I could have bargained to close the back door but just agree to delete the omnipotent state language. I would have done it to protect the statement of principles. If all they had asked was to delete that, they would have won. But they wanted to delete all the Dallas Accord language. And that just wasn't going to happen. They could have won.
I have a vague idea of what you're talking about. So you have to remember, I'm not as steeped in the history. I know that just a number of people say the same.
In 10, they tried to just take care of the state language, and that was it. But the way the whole thing was structured, it left it wide open to do other things. And it's like, no. People said, no, we're not going to go for that, so we left it.
At this brief history. So in 72, when the party was formed, the statement of principles was written differently. And D. Frank Robinson wanted to put in the 7As. But they realized there was 80 of them at a convention, and that was a very high threshold. So they gave themselves a 2 years cooling off period and said, we've written it. Let's say that the 7As doesn't go into effect until the 74 convention. At the 74 convention only, it can be amended by 2/3. Okay. So they could have come back and scratched the whole thing. But they came back and actually made it more radical than it was in 72 and then put in the 7As. Because what happened in those 2 years when the party was initially formed, it was explicitly a minarchist party. There was anarchists in the party, but it was kind of like pat on the head. A bunch more anarchists came in the party between 72 and 74, and they added toleration for both views into the statement of principles, and then the 7As. So the Dallas Accord was the agreement between the two factions. So that's what they tried to do in 2008, which has been kept peace in this party for a long time. So the minarchists came in and tried to undo it in 2008, and that was just such bad faith, because it doesn't take a side. It's not like it's weighted towards one or the other. It basically said this is a dumb argument, and we'll argue about it when it's relevant. It's not relevant now, people. You're arguing about anarchy when, really dumb.
I like the argument between the anarchists and the minarchists to be, you're arguing about whether the train should stop in San Francisco or Oakland, but the train's still on blocks back in Boston.
Yeah, the train doesn't even have an engine.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
all in the caboose.
Got it. Yes.
So that's the Dallas Accord, and why everyone is so passionate, really, about the statement of principles. Did you ever watch that portion of the convention where I argued for the 7As to close the back door?
Actually, I did. I think it was live on C-SPAN.
I don't know if that was, but yeah.
I've actually watched your conventions live on C-SPAN for a number of years.
And stayed awake?
I had them freaking
The stripper
out.
was good. The stripper was good.
That was more a reference to C-SPAN than our conventions.
So, yeah, no, I had them hooting and hollering and freaking the fuck out. Whenever it comes to the statement of principles and I stand up, everyone's just like, all right, popcorn time, because that's my, Rain Man. I'm just, But you want to hear something funny about that convention, Mike? I'm listening back to it. This is kind of cool, but also kind of creepy. Somebody apparently was sitting next to the tape recorder or whatever for the official party recording. And halfway through it, he just started whispering to me throughout the convention, "We love you, Karen Ann. We love you so much." It was so weird. I'm listening back going, that's cool, but it's also kind of creepy. I have no idea who this person is.
This was New Orleans, right? This was New Orleans?
In New Orleans, yeah.
I must have missed that one, because
yeah, no,
I remember the debate, but I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, I'm going to extract that out because I was like, that's a long game, because the dude's counting on me at some point in the future listening to the whole convention and hearing this, but. And I have a question for you, since you've watched our conventions. I'd love to know your opinion. I'm sure you've heard me say mine, and I'll say it up front right here, is about Nick Sarwark as a presiding officer. I thought he was phenomenal as a presiding officer.
From what I remember, it was good. It was good. I was not watching, trying to make a judgment on the presiding officer. I was looking at the business going on. And he seemed to do a good job from everything I remember. I don't remember anything where I said, this guy sucks.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No, he has a charisma for a crowd. He could control the crowd. And you either have that or you don't, especially a libertarian crowd. And for whatever my criticisms of Nick are, and you know they are many now, and you've interacted with him a little, but the minute he gets up there as a presiding officer, he's magical, I think.
Except for the JudCom fiasco.
Well, he screwed that up. I'm not saying he never made mistakes, but he made mistakes.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, that one
Oh.
was a big mistake. That was a very big mistake. In fact, actually, I was at the time. I had just started serving as the parliamentary research editor for National Parliamentarian. We actually used that as an example in an opinion.
Oh, where? Oh, I'd love to see that. Yeah.
I will dig it out for you. But I had come to the conclusion, along with the rest of the people on the committee, that you could basically they could act to fill the vacancy to get it up to a quorum and just continue to appoint a few other people until you got it up to a quorum. It was based on Rule 10. It was based on Question and Answer 107 in parliamentary law.
I wish I had seen that when we were arguing, because that was bad. And what we ended up doing was having an unofficial judicial committee that the LNC only agreed to be bound by, but the members weren't bound by. And of course, the LNC could immediately agree not to be, because it was only a resolution, but it was better than nothing. It was crazy.
Yeah,
but
I wasn't on the floor that day because I was down for the count with some gallbladder problems, but I saw the tape later, and I'm going, "Oh my God, what the hell happened here?"
What happened, as you might, you'll know, is he treated it as a privileged motion to adjourn. It's not a privileged motion to adjourn when it dissolves the assembly. So he didn't allow any debate. And Daryl was trying to debate. Daryl was screaming, but he said it was privileged. It's not when it dissolves the assembly. But that's the problem with Nick. Everyone thought Nick knew parliamentary procedure. He didn't. He just had charisma. He didn't know it very well. Like when he tried to vote on bring up a motion to reconsider because he abstained. He goes, "Well, I wasn't on the losing side." I'm like, that's only on committees, dude. Like, he didn't know the finer details. His force of personality was so great.
But no, going back, I do remember that, and that was the kind of thing where if you're going to sit there and judge him as a presiding officer, you take off points for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. But but we had that clipped, and it was afterwards when someone said, "The Judicial Committee," after we already adjourned, and he's like, "Damn it,
I remember. But I also know that in that kind of a situation, I think even if the motion is privileged, it is in order to announce some level of some business that must be conducted by the assembly. In this case, the convention. It doesn't mean the assembly has to do it, but you do announce that you give them warning. Yeah, that would be something that was a problem.
Well, I think part of it also at the time was they were right in the middle of the votes for the JudCom when this whole thing popped up because they were up in the hard time, and that threw everything out of whack.
Yeah, the hard time was, but they needed to have the assembly say that they would just take the highest vote getters like they did with at-large, and they didn't. That was the thing, and no one got a majority.
And that's where the whole thing screwed up, because they tried to apply that from at-large to also apply to JudCom, and that was never the case.
Yeah. Yep. So that was, but yeah, I would take off points, but still, it's an easy mistake. But God bless Daryl Perry. Daryl Perry knew it was wrong. Like a lot of people, you probably don't know this about Daryl, Mike. I've been on Radical Caucus platform committees with Daryl. Daryl is an excellent presiding officer. He's very.
I haven't seen him actually run a meeting, so I can't speak to that.
Oh, he's great. He's really, really, really good. And a lot of people don't know that about him. They just remember his driver's license and the tomato. What was it that needed to be as legal as tomatoes? I don't know. It was something where he was screaming and pounding the pulpit when he was running for president. And they just view him as like this crazy radical.
Well, that was cannabis. That was cannabis.
But he's an excellent.
He was a fan of the tomato model for legalization, and I remember telling him, I said, "Look, I've researched this when I was trying to help what's his name, Steve Cubby, write up a resolution or a law, in California to make it run like the wine industry. And I said, the tomato industry is not the right answer. It is so highly regulated and so full of crap from various places, regulation from the
You're
places.
being
This is the wrong
pedantic,
model.
Mike.
No, at the time I
No,
was
no,
very much into that.
I do realize that everybody who's watching this is because we're all suddenly doing this inside baseball stuff,
Yeah.
really, about the Libertarian Party. And but I've also,
Yeah,
I'm not part of the Libertarian Party,
Yeah.
but I've followed it enough that I know what you're talking about. Half
Well,
the
yeah,
time.
'cause the natural habitat. It's like the documentary.
Yes, yes.
There's something I'm going to send you because I love your view on it. Mike,
Okay.
what I'm going to send him is the opinion I wrote as chair of that platform committee when Aaron Starr was trying to be Schrodinger's. Remember when he was trying to say he could decide mid-vote what seat he was going to occupy?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that bullshit.
And
Yeah.
I got overturned, and that's fine. You could get, but I still think I'm right. But I'd be very curious. It was a weird situation, but I wrote an extensive ruling on it because it was nutty. But I'd love to send that to you because I'd like to know where I was right and where I was wrong.
I would love to read. Right now,
Yeah,
I will say this, I'm going to be delayed for about 3 or 4 days if you send it out tonight.
Yeah.
Because I'm in the middle of doing stuff for a client.
Oh
No
yeah,
worries.
no problem.
What
It's
a-
no hurry. This is like from 2 years ago, but it was
Okay.
just.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was just
in the
interesting.
in the same meeting, in the same committee. I was on that committee too. Karen Ann was chairing it. At one point, Aaron was just blathering on about something, and I forget what the hell it was. And I just on my laptop, I brought up in like 72 point. I put in the word filibuster.
And what did I
So-
say? What did I say?
You
Mr.
said
Seaver?
it was indecorous.
I did. I said it was indecorous. I said decorum, Mr. Seaback.
But I made my point. He shut up.
Well, I did warn people when I posted this on Facebook. I said, think Richard Pryor.
Yeah. But I did. I
That's
did
actually what
have
I
to
do.
scold.
we
Mr.
all
Seaback.
ain't that black.
I did have to scold him for decorum.
but you were also laughing your ass off internally.
Well, listen. If I
There
didn't
is
see
if I can
it,
tell a brief story, tell
Sure,
a brief story
yes.
about decorum when I was presiding over a meeting. I have a cat, and she's not around here immediately today because I'm sitting in her chair. She doesn't like that. So, but I do have a cat, and I have to scold the cat occasionally and call her bad kitty, bad kitty. One night, I'm presiding over a meeting in a housing cooperative that I've done for years. And a member gets up and speaks in debate and then begins to refer derogatorily to another member. And I bring down the gavel and say, I'm trying to remember my exact quote. The member will not refer to other members and will be seated. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, this is exactly the same tone as I use when I'm saying, bad kitty, bad kitty. And I'm trying now not to crack up.
Oh my God! I can imagine that happening. They go, no, bad kitty.
Yes, and I'm trying, don't laugh. Because if you haven't guessed, I do have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And it's most of my clients who see me presiding in particular assume I have none whatsoever, but I do. I find your show hilarious. Outrageously funny is I think the word I use, but I enjoy it, and I think it's funny, and I like humor.
well, yeah.
I think what we have going is that we're serious when we need to be, but we're not too serious the rest of the time, and that's what makes it work.
Well, I tend not to be terribly serious in meetings either, but I'm not, as you know, Michael, where'd that come from? Mike.
What the hell?
I'm not indecorous in meetings. I don't attack members in meetings. I'm very polite, and I don't cuss in meetings.
I noticed.
There's a time and a place. I don't, so it's really not.
But there's a many time you want to sit there and tell them, shut up.
In the meetings, I believe in respecting the meetings, so it wasn't really out. It wasn't hypocritical for me to scold you. I'm
not saying it was hypocritical at all.
No,
I just know you were laughing internally when you did it.
But I do bust out with some things in meetings. You were at the LPCO meeting, right, with the policy manual where I was trying to get them to pass it, and I said, people. The first time I said, please just pass it. I go, we can always amend it. I go, it isn't like I'm ordering you all to cut off your foreskins.
I was there for that. I was at that meeting. I almost fell out of my chair.
Foreskins. It's not that serious.
I almost fell out of my chair.
Probably is not a violation of decorum. I would not have ruled it a violation of decorum.
Oh, they were all
only
just
if it happened in real time.
Oh my God! Because
maybe
it was
not
a
even
newborn.
that, but that's.
And in my first LNC meeting, my very first one, where I was trying to get them. Actually, I was trying to get them to give away Elpedia because they wouldn't do anything with it, and George Phillies wanted to. And then all of a sudden, they didn't want to transfer the domain. And this was like my first debate in the LNC. I said, you guys, I go, you're like the guy who's got a girlfriend at home and you don't want to sleep with her until someone else wants to sleep with her. And then all of a sudden, you don't want to let her go. And they were all just looking at me like, what the hell?
That is not a violation of decorum.
No. It's my analogies. You remember?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of one where, and I was doing this was actually a group of township commissioners. And in the meeting, I had tapes of the meeting, and one of the members turns to the other member, and everybody there was named John, it seemed. And John 1 said John 2. John,
that makes it fun.
You're a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite, John. You're a hypocrite. And I remember talking about this at the meeting and going over this and going over it and saying analysis. And I said to the man who's now a judge, sir, you cannot call him a hypocrite. That is a violation of decorum. You can say his proposition is hypocritical,
yes,
but you can't call him a hypocrite.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
The difference between what he said, between his proposals and him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the thing is, if I ever did misbehave in a meeting, I would take the discipline because I do take meetings very, very seriously. But what I do on my no, libertarians, no.
Yeah, well, that does not apply to anything like outside of a meeting, and just about anything goes.
But of course, as you said,
from your mouth
if they have
to
the votes, they could
ears.
suspend me. I mean, that's just the way it is. If they have the votes, they can do it, even if I think the reason is bullshit.
They can suspend you for having pink hair.
Yeah. If they have the votes, they can do it.
Wearing a Pink Floyd T-shirt. They can suspend you because you. Well, they can actually do that. They can suspend you for cursing. And I do warn people, you do curse like a sailor. But they can do that. Now, none of those things are a violation of decorum. They can say, we don't like your political views, and we will suspend you for that.
Yeah. But then they face the political consequences for that. But seriously, if I lost my cool and lost it in a meeting, I wouldn't fight whatever discipline because you can't act like that in a meeting. You just can't. That's a no-go. That's a no-go thing. You don't lose your cool at a meeting. Okay, so crap. There was something else I wanted. I've yelled once at a meeting, but it was when I was chair because Daryl Perry was beating up Aaron Starr and he wouldn't stop. And Wayne had to come running in because all of a sudden
why were you yelling for that? Why were you yelling for that? You should have been cheering.
I was chairing. I was chairing the meeting, and I needed to get order in the Zoom room. And I'm like, Daryl Perry. I've never, ever, ever had to yell, ever. But he was doing it on purpose, All right. So first thing, the rule shift function, and this I hope some LP members end up watching this because I should bring up the proposal because this is. Listen, Daniel Fishman, if you're watching this, I love you, dude, but I hate your bylaws proposals.
Give me 1 second,
I like
folks.
you, but I hate your bylaws proposals. He's trying to, and I should pull this up, he's trying to write into the bylaws that if the bylaws mention anything, just even mention it, you can't go to Roberts at all.
It depends. To an extent, that is correct. They have supremacy. But it's going to depend on what it is because it technically could still be suspended.
That's I mean you can't foolproof that. If you want it not to go to Roberts, then write good bylaws that aren't ambiguous that require Roberts. I mean, that's the way you solve it. You can't put in, well, if our bylaws suck, well, too bad. He's very upset about the vice chair thing. So he's very upset that people were going to Roberts. And I understand Mike's position where he doesn't think the bylaws are ambiguous. But if Mike thought the bylaws are ambiguous, he wouldn't be getting all ass mad about going to Roberts. It's a different argument, you know.
Yeah, it is.
You can put in a word to fix it.
Well, they got a proposal for that.
God damn it! Kick my camera straight.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something where you have to go out there and change everything. You can fix that by saying, and I think by putting in the operative wording would be in the right spot, including a vacancy in the office of the chair.
Yeah, and there is a proposal for that. You're making me motion sick, Mike. You got to stop that.
I'm trying to get it straight here. It's not cooperating.
Does happen in meetings, so.
Yeah, no, there is a proposal to fix that, but he's also trying to. But
that's better.
He also, and I would love your opinion on this. There's some really crappy language. There's two different proposals. One of them is to ditch Roberts for Francis and Francis, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I did take a look because you did mention this in a PM to me. I do talk with my hands, by the way, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah. My father was a signalman in the U.S. Navy, so I'm basically doing semaphore over here. I'm not familiar with the authority. I looked at some of the things first of all, I looked at the reviews of it, and they were not nearly as extensive as Robert, and there were some negative reviews. I think one of the great problems is that you're going to have a lot more gray areas. Get off of there, kitty. You're not allowed up. You can come over here. I'm going to get my water bottle after you. Yeah, now get off. Okay.
Bad kitty.
You exchange specificity for ambiguity.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the problems. There we go.
Oh.
And I knew she was going to make it appearance. Come on.
She's like, you don't need to see.
No, I knew she was going to make it. She always does that. In fact, when she heard your voice, she came downstairs. But I think that one of the very good things about Robert is that it is very detailed, it is encyclopedic, and it can cover not all of the situations. And believe me, Mr. Hunneman and I will disagree on some of the situations because I don't think that it does explain some things particularly well. But it explains just about everything particularly well.
And I think, as you and I spoke before, when it's not covered by either your bylaws or your parliamentary authority, then you fall back on this ambiguous, nebulous, general parliamentary law, which is even vaster, and you can't point to it.
Yeah, if it is in fact part of the common parliamentary law. I actually did an article called "Making Parliamentary Law," where it deals with how you get into these, how you develop these things. And I've actually made some, and it was completely by accident. You stumble into these things that get developed into this, and it's messy. One of the analogies that I used in making it was, we've all seen, I'm sure, I've Got a Bill, or I'm Just a Bill. The cartoon,
the Schoolhouse Rock, yep.
Yeah, we've all seen that. It gives a nice, neat idea of how you make a statutory law.
If it only worked that way.
Yes, but I mean, it's simplified, obviously. Parliamentary law is not created like that. It is considered to be meeting-made law. It is very sloppy. At least by some, it is considered to be meeting-made law. It is very sloppy. It just depends on how some things, maybe over 20 or 30 years, will creep into the books. One of the things where you've seen this happen has been custom. If you go back and take a look at the 1990 edition of Robert, you're not going to find too much on custom. You look at the 2100 book, or the 12th 2020 edition, you're going to find a lot more on custom. You're going to find some descriptions of precedent that were not there before. So some of that is due to the changing factors of parliamentary law. But trying to come up with what is or isn't the general parliamentary law is exceptionally difficult, possibly to the point of impossible.
Is that just because of how parliamentary procedure and law have, I guess, for lack of a better term, evolved over the years versus custom, or trial and error, or just how's it become more difficult?
Well, yes, it evolves, and I'll tell you what happened with custom, because this was something that I was dealing with very, very early on. And I'm putting a whole bunch of people to sleep, I know, I'm sorry. But
no,
okay.
the people who love this shit love this shit.
Okay. What all started when I had a friend of mine, and I'll say hello to her, Jean McGuire, who was a township supervisor. And I had just gotten my RP at that point. Okay, you say, here's somebody with a whole bunch of titles, he's written a whole bunch of stuff. This is 1995. I do not have all of those things. It's right before Thanksgiving. And she has a question about what's going on the Richland Township, Cambria County, Pennsylvania Board of Supervisors, where she is a supervisor. Okay, this is not exactly the U.S. Senate. Okay, it is not even the biggest municipality in the county. Okay, so it's a minor municipality, and she asked me a question. Well, we use Robert by custom, but we have these other customs. Which one do we follow? And I wrote an answer for her in an opinion. And I was a lot younger then, and my mind was a lot more nimbler than it is today. And I wrote it overnight. And then at the same time, I got the request, and this was in the mail. Remember, this is before nobody was shooting emails to me, okay, at this point. Mm-hmm. So at this particular point, at the same time, I got a letter from the incoming editor of National Parliamentarian, NP. If I say NP, that's what I'm referring to. And I had written a couple of articles in it. I've written substantially more than a couple of articles now, but I'm not somebody who is a well-known author. I've not published a lot. I've not really published anything that was particularly groundbreaking. Okay, at that point. And I got a letter from her at the same time and said, well, what were topics would you like to write about? And, one of them is, what's the role of custom in meetings? So we have her question, and we have this. And I wrote the opinion overnight. And I sent it out to them. And their attorney, who probably is now a judge and probably regrets saying this at the time, said, we follow Robert loosely. I said, that's going to come back and haunt you for the remainder of your career. So, because I actually did quote him on it. There have been other things that will come back and haunt you. But anyhow, Jean McGuire, I sent this out to Jean McGuire. She got it. I got a message on my answering machine that said, this is so cool. Now remember, we're about the same age. And at this point, this is 98. I'm basically 30 years younger. Well, 25 years younger, roughly. Okay? And then 95, excuse me. And anyhow, I looked at this, and we had a blizzard, and I'm sitting in the middle of the blizzard thinking, I'm going to write an article, and I'm going to base it on the research that I did for this opinion. So that's what I did. What I said is custom does not supersede something that is adopted. That sounds incredibly mundane. Okay? And I used it based on
Robert. There's a lot of power in that statement, though.
Pardon?
There's a lot of power in that statement.
Nobody was saying it in 1995 or 1996 when the article came out. Some of that got picked up, I don't know directly from there or not, in the 10th edition of RONR. Some of that because then I wrote another article. The first article I wrote was called Custom Usage in RONR, and that was an NP. And in the AIP's Parliamentary Journal, I wrote The Role of Custom, where I took a look at this much more broadly with a number of other parliamentary authorities. Well, you know what happens? 2000 comes around. Robert suddenly says, you know what? If custom conflicts with an adopted rule, it falls to the ground. Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure, which was called Sturgis then, and it's now sort of semi-replaced by the AIP Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure, said, no, custom at the time said, custom supersedes your rules. What happened when we got to I think it was the 2012 edition of it? It says, no. Custom does not supersede your rules. So without trying to do anything here, and in all fairness, probably not being able to tell you what common or general parliamentary law was, I ended up making general parliamentary law. Completely by happenstance. I mean, I'm not taking credit. I'm not taking credit for brilliant.
No, it sounds like, though, what happened was an evolution away from custom into what's codified, which makes a lot more sense anyway, because if you don't write it down, it
We got some
doesn't
echo
happen.
in here now.
That might be me. Was that me?
Who?
Mike's voice is echoing.
What's weird?
Oh, okay. I don't hear it. Sure, you're not hearing
You guys
voices?
aren't.
Try it
Well,
again,
that's
Mike.
another question. But
Now
okay,
it's okay.
what I was trying to say, that's weird, was that it sounds like what happened was a movement away from the unwritten rules and customs, so to speak, into more of the codified rules that weren't necessarily custom. And that was kind of a general good evolution anyway, because to quote a fictional character in a Tom Clancy series, if you don't write it down, it never happened. So having that evolve into specific codified and yeah, exactly. Great book. Terrible. I don't know if they're making a movie or not, but anyway, going to that codified and by definition, hi Kitty, impartial set of rules versus a custom which could be applied subjectively, is actually a good thing.
So
well, the rule could be applied subjectively as well. You know, if the assembly decides not to do that. So that isn't.
Yeah.
But if you take a look at some manuals even before that, for example, the Standard Code, or excuse me, Demeter's Manual of Parliamentary Law, they've actually said that custom will supersede an adopted rule. They put that in there. Now, they haven't done an update of this book since 1969.
They were a little overdue.
Actually, a year after I met Kim. So just so you know. I'm mentioning you again, Kim. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's my girlfriend.
So, because I'm already starting to prepare my arguments against that bylaws proposal, because, to me, the vaguer you make things, the more you allow the LNC to make things up as it goes, and I've already been a victim of that, and I'm not a fan. And I don't think any member should be. You don't want to be... listen, I can testify, you do not want to be left to the tender mercies of the LNC.
And not even just them. I made this mistake on our local bylaws, and it was a mistake. I own it. I screwed it up. And now they still haven't fixed it.
Now they don't even have it anymore. They got rid of Roberts at El Paso.
Oh, fun.
They have 2 pages. It's called Martha's Rules.
Ay.
And
then people wonder why I'm not active in my county. That's why.
It'll come to bite them.
I think one of the things that you can really stress is that, for the most part, you can write your own rules to modify Robert.
Right.
Usually by actually adopting a separate set of rules that says, all right, we're going to do this particular thing differently. Sometimes, and this is where the rule shift function comes in, you can't do that.
Right. But I don't think that applies in any of the circumstances in which we're talking about. They just think, oh, Roberts is so long, we want to make something short, and don't realize that you're actually making things more complicated. And
it's a brevity caucus.
And as a political party specifically, I know this isn't persuasive to libertarians, but I think sometimes we have a knee-jerk function. There's a reason why the other major political parties use Roberts, and so does like the American Bar Association. it's on these more complex organizations, you need it. And B, a lot of governments, local, state, are also based on Roberts, and we're not training up our people to be able to function in those environments if we're not
That
using it.
that is a good point, because that's where I do see a lot of usage of Robert if it's in local
Right.
governments. And I know that, for example, our Republican State Committee here, and I'm not associated with it. I did some work for somebody there as a
Yeah.
I did work for people as a parliamentarian.
You're off screen, Mike.
I'm in my
But-
Kilroy mode.
Sorry.
It's just my phone being stupid.
yeah.
Keep going.
But they do these things for, they use Robert, and that is something that is important to understand, and it is, in that respect, it is going to be important. I've been part of a school district. We use Robert. The other organizations that I'm familiar with at local governments, they use Robert by custom, but they still use Robert. And when I say by custom, it means that they will refer to Robert to handle any procedural matter. And many other larger townships, certainly in the Philadelphia area, that I'm also familiar with, they've adopted Robert. In some cases, they've actually put it in statute.
Whoops. We lost our
That says
boxes.
it's going to be Robert.
You lost what?
Yeah.
We
the
lost our
boxes.
boxes.
Oh, you did? Hold on.
Yeah.
Which
all we
is
see
fine
is
with
you.
me, so that's not a problem.
What'd I do?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Here we go. Sorry.
There we are.
Yeah, okay.
Oops.
Yeah, and I can be quite fuzzy now, so that's. But a lot of times.
Is that you or the cat?
Yeah. Maybe if I actually just cleaned the lens of the camera, it might work. But no, a lot of these things, do use them whether or not they've adopted it.
And I just think we will really be crippling our people from being able to be effective activists and candidates and electeds when we get elected.
Mm-hmm.
So that's,
No doubt.
and of course the tender mercies of the LNC. So I've already talked to the guy who's my unofficial assistant and said, I'm probably going to be asking you to sit in for me because I want to argue that one. There's a few bylaws that I probably want to argue because I just think that would be absolutely
don't, I
terrible
will.
for us. Well, a bunch of us, I
Yeah.
think, will.
Yeah. But, a lot of this is, and again, I'm going back to this, you can be flexible with your rules. If you don't like them, you can change them.
Mm-hmm. And they're easier to change than bylaws.
Okay, but
Yes.
I want to read you something. This was Dan's
Okay.
first proposal. Listen, and
Okay.
this is awful. Okay, right now, Article 16 says parliamentary authority, and it's the standard language from Roberts. He wants to change it to the rules contained in the supplemental governing documents shall govern the party in all cases. And what? Or
Can you put that
where
on
the
screen?
bylaws or any special rules of order are silent. What supplemental governing documents? Like what the? But you want to hear something scary? Chuck Moulton supported this. What does it mean? I have no idea what this means. Look, I want to share my screen. You got to see this because I know even me saying it, you were like, that made no sense. Let me get off the.
Yeah,
Let me
in
hide
here.
that.
Yeah, can you blow that up?
Off my glasses.
I don't think I could blow it up. So the
'Cause
green.
I can't even see that.
Let me see if I can.
There, that's better. Now scroll down a little bit. What? A little more.
Hold on, let me move this. Oh, it's going to,
Okay.
it chopped it off a
Bring it
little.
up. Bring it up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, that I can see.
Yeah, the rules to supplemental governing. Well, first of all, it doesn't define what the supplemental governing
And we don't
document
have anything that. What is that? What's that mean?
I have
It means
no
they
idea.
can try to use anything for a parliamentary authority they want,
Right, like the
because they're
and
striking
look,
out the Roberts section right next to it.
Look at Chuck.
It
I
means
support
they don't
this
have a
proposal.
parliamentary authority, which is going to
Right.
be interesting.
Right.
That's what that means. But I should say the general, I don't like using the word common parliamentary law, but under the general parliamentary law, the rules that were last in effect are the custom of the society. So guess what? If they do this, they're stuck with Robert.
Oh my God. Hopefully somebody talks
Ay, ay, ay.
some sense into. Oh, and then here's this one replacing Roberts.
And that's actually out of Mason. That's actually out of Mason. So.
And then there's this one to change it to Francis and Francis, which at least is an authority. But
yeah.
why?
But,
why? There's been no argument for why, other than what your personal subjective taste. How is this better for the party? It's just, to me, I'm livid.
I would also be looking to see if, especially with, and I've never read it, so I wouldn't be able to tell. I would be looking, because I did look at some reviews of it, is that does this do anything for minority rights and for individual rights? It tended to say all these things should be done by majority vote, which is great until you have a majority of one and they decide to close debate.
And libertarians are not big fans of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And
or they decide to do these things by majority, like kick you out by majority vote.
Right. And that's and that's how I'm going to be arguing. And I said even to Dan privately, Dan, this was a big upset in the party. Do you really want me on the mic reliving the whole suspension thing? Because throwing chairs time again. Like, dude, come on. It's not broken. This is my view when I elect people, and I didn't know this, and this is my fault, because I normally send questionnaires to all the bylaws committee candidates. To me, a bylaws committee should be very conservative. They're not there to be pulling out their pet proposals out of their fucking asses. They're there to fix things that are broken.
Yes.
Conservative.
When I do things as a parliamentarian, I tend to do them as a conservative small c.
Right, that's what I mean.
I'm
Conservative
also a
approach.
conservative large c, but
Yeah.
that doesn't make any difference. So that's...
No, but the bylaws, especially on a mature organization, you got to have a light touch. But what happens is we get all these mavericks on the bylaws committee who decide, they've stored up these proposals. Dan also wants to make the chair a 4-year term.
No.
I won't take an opinion one way or the other on that. That's up to your,
Well,
that's a political decision.
It is. But you want to know what I say? Because he goes, we can't be switching chairs in the middle of a presidential election. I go, we don't have to. The delegates can just reelect that one. It's up to the delegates. We don't have term limits, dude. You can have a 100-year chair if the delegates want them, and he lives that long, or she lives that long. So I think he's dropped that though after what happened with Bishop Benjamin. Between after Nick and Joe, I think we're like, maybe we don't need a chair at all.
Well, part of it is this also, and the idea of writing bylaws to fix proposals to fix legit problems. That's what I've always looked at.
Right.
When I look at I look at them saying, is this a legit problem? Is it gonna improve anything, or is this somebody just pissing
Is
in
it
the wind?
changed because I would love to see a bylaws committee one day that goes, it's all good. We don't have any proposals. But this egos. But I did not set a questionnaire. Normally I will not vote for, and I voted for Dan. Normally I will not vote for anyone who has all these. No. Platform's a little different. Bylaws, no thank you.
They're scared of having me in the National Bylaws Committee because I'll go in there and I'll propose fixes to problems, but they don't want that.
So I want to pull up though now, if I can. Let me figure it out.
You've kind of skirted it. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Wrong screen. Okay, I want to pull up the rule shift, if I can figure it out. Hold on. What am I doing wrong here? Is it up now?
There it is.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So take us through this. I don't want to read it verbatim unless we need to. But if you could I think when you originally sent this to me, I thought it meant something different than it did, but it's actually what it refers to is more interesting, I think.
Okay.
So
this does come up all the time. This does come up all the time. Start with that. But basically what it says is that what we were just talking about, most of the time, If you want to supersede a rule in your parliamentary authority, and it doesn't make any difference whether it's Robert or some other authority, you can do so by adopting something that is a special rule of order, or sometimes known as a standing rule in other manuals. But it's a rule related to procedure that you adopt and you decide we're going to do things this way. And that will normally supersede the parliamentary authority.
Let's give one relevant example. Is our special rule of order that requires me to record every motion in the minutes.
Bingo.
Okay.
Bingo. Under Robert, you would basically record a main motion and a few other things as amended. But you would not be required to, for example, if somebody proposed an amendment to that, it was defeated, you would not be required to put all that information in there. Under some other manuals, you would, but not under Robert. But basically, if you wanted to do that and saying, yeah, we want all this information in there, you have to create what's known under Robert as a special rule of order. Okay? That's fairly easy enough. You can pretty much change all the rules in Robert, or almost all the rules in Robert. You don't have to worry about it. There are a few rules that do not function like that. And what this is, and this is very hard to explain, and I still have difficulties explaining it. I'm the guy who wrote this.
And let me know if I ever need to page down.
Okay. You can if you want to. I don't know. That's just an example. But there are a few rules out there that say, okay, if you are adopting a parliamentary authority, that parliamentary authority can say you will not do these certain things unless you authorize these certain things in the bylaws.
Correct.
One example is proxy voting, and that's probably the most famous example. Robert
we have
says
that in Colorado. But go ahead.
Pardon?
We have that in our Colorado bylaws. We allow it.
Okay. Robert says, if you adopt this authority, our book, and you want to have proxy voting, you actually have to put it in the bylaws. And if you don't put it in the bylaws, you cannot have proxy voting as long as you have also adopted our book. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
not as it makes perfect sense.
Email ballots would be another.
Pardon?
Email ballots would be another.
Yes. Any kind of absentee voting has to be authorized in the bylaws according to Robert. So if you've adopted this and you want to adopt a rule that says let's have an email, if you wanted to adopt, you wanted to have an email ballot, you could not just go out and adopt a rule and say, yeah, let's have an email ballot. You cannot supersede Robert on those points unless you actually put that supersession, I guess that's a word, in the bylaws.
It is.
Okay, good. I didn't butcher the English language any more than I normally do. Great. But that's basically, and all parliamentary authorities have this function. All of them that I am aware of, at least of the ones that are designed for non-legislative bodies. I think I would be hard-pressed to find it in Mason's manual. But here's a list that I kind of came up with of the ones that I could kind of find. But this becomes very controversial because it says, yeah, you can make your own decisions except in these relatively limited areas. Now, if you're writing bylaws, you want to know what those areas are. So you can say, you know what? We want to have proxy voting. We need to put this into our bylaws to allow proxy voting. Okay?
Yep.
With you.
Okay.
I guess that raises a question, though.
This isn't controversial to me. I don't know why, but I don't find it controversial.
I don't find it controversial, but I do find it a little bit confusing. And let me try to elaborate that a little bit. We've got we've got our bylaws, which can contain rules themselves. We've got the standing and special rules of order, and I always get them mixed up as to which one's which. Right, and then below that we have, parliamentary rules themselves. Okay. In the base sense, you have the rules in the bylaws are kind of a special rule, but they're amendable as a special rule, but they're not the nature of a bylaw themselves, even though they're at that level to give them a higher precedence and superiority. The part I always get mixed up on this, and this is something I struggled with in writing bylaws for several years, is how can you tell what those rules in the nature of in a bylaw is versus where they would be a standing or a special rule or even just referring to parliamentary rule?
How do you know when something's in the bylaws that's in the nature of a rule of order?
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
This is I think Mr. Hunneman will disagree with me, and I've never heard him give a good answer, so he's free to continue to disagree with me on this. This is my definition for what constitutes a rule in the nature of a rule of order in the bylaws.
Okay.
If that rule were not in the bylaws, could you adopt it as a special rule of order? A rule in the bylaws that says proxy voting is okay cannot be adopted as a special rule of order. Okay. So therefore, that rule could not possibly be a rule in the nature of a rule of order.
Okay, that brings the natural follow-on for me is, what are the limitations then for a special rule of order?
Basically, they have to relate to procedure, and they cannot be something that is specifically required to be in the bylaws. Just about everything will be a rule in the nature of a rule of order.
Okay.
So you're saying a lot could be suspended in the bylaws?
Yes. Let me give you a good example. Suppose that you've adopted a set of bylaws, and you don't have anything in there about how to amend them. Okay?
God help us.
No, I've seen that.
You don't need God for this. This is easier.
It's in Roberts.
It's in Roberts. And secondly, if you don't like that because it doesn't conflict with your bylaws, you could adopt a special rule of order to determine how your bylaws can be amended.
You can? I thought that had to be in the bylaws okay. That's a new
one
to
me.
No,
you said it doesn't have to be. You just said it doesn't have to be in the bylaws.
I know. I'm but I'm still like. And so
did I just blow your mind?
Look.
Yeah, you did, because Roberts on the section on bylaws specifically says you need this section in your bylaws.
Well, I think it says you should have that section.
Yeah, it also says though that if you don't have it, this is what the vote is. So that is a rule in the nature of a rule of order. And I take the position that if there is nothing in Robert that says you must put this in your bylaws, and it deals with procedure within a meeting under the definition that they use, you could do it as a special rule of order. Let me give you another example.
Yeah, come on, because I'm
the secretary shall take minutes of the meeting. Okay? If that is in your bylaw, you could suspend the secretary. You don't like the job that she's doing, okay?
Don't give him any ideas.
Yeah. Well, no. You could, for the entire meeting, suspend the secretary from taking the minutes. That will relieve you from taking the minutes for a whole meeting, so don't worry about it. That's, if they want to do that, that's fine. They could actually suspend the rules to do that, even though the bylaws say the secretary shall take the minutes, because that is a duty of an officer related to the conduct of business within a meeting.
That actually makes sense, because they tried to do that at the 2020 electronic convention. Somebody moved to relieve me of. I'm controversial. If you haven't figured this out,
actually, suspend the rules.
Yeah,
to suspend
they did.
The rules. Yeah, it takes a 2/3 vote.
There was because I was objecting because I said that the convention wasn't valid, and there were certain certifications I had to sign with some states, and I had concerns if it would be fraudulent. So they tried to suspend. But that got resolved a different way. But so I get what you're saying there. Okay, because you could do that to the chair too. They tried to remove chair Nick as well for that meeting.
Yes, you can. In fact, if you talk about coup d'etats, that's one of the things that we will often talk about doing. You can suspend the rules for the entire session, as session is defined in Robert, and remove the chair from presiding over the meeting. But the thing is that the idea that the secretary will take minutes of the meeting is a rule in the nature, or a president presides, is a rule in the nature of a rule of order. And even if that is included in the bylaws, you can suspend that rule.
Let me ask you another question then. Say the bylaws say that the chair shall appoint the chairs of all committees.
No.
Why?
And I'll tell you why.
I'm curious.
Remember what I just said. I said you can suspend the rules for the entire session. If you appoint a chair for a committee, that will last beyond the entire session. It will not be within the context of a business meeting or within the context of a particular session. That's the reason.
Okay. I'm trying to think of some other things we have in the Colorado bylaws. I'm just like, but things that don't have to do with meetings. Like, let me give you. We have something where our candidates for public office had to be members of the party for 150 days. That's not suspendable.
That could not be suspended. A duty of an officer that the treasurer shall deposit all the money into a federally insured bank. I have no idea if that's if you do that or not, or if you have any money to deposit, which might be the other case, but that rule could not be suspended because it takes place outside of a meeting. A rule that the treasurer has to report at each meeting could be suspended.
Interesting.
It's a very narrow thing. Now, right now, you are moving up on things that a number of even professional registered parliamentarians don't understand. I will tell you a story. I will not tell you who it was involved, but we were talking about the possibility of suspending rules in the bylaws. And one person who was a very experienced parliamentarian, and this was on a message board, said, "Since when can you suspend rules in the bylaws?" And I wrote back, well, at least since 1915. Yeah. Because it was in the 1915 edition. But it's in there, by the way. It is, when you're talking about this, I think we better give us page citation so they don't assume that we've all gone crazy. It is at 2:22, I believe, where you can find it. You can also find this referenced under suspension of the rules and under points of order, where it says, no, if you violate this rule, it is not a breach of a continuing nature, or yes, you can suspend this rule.
Okay, now, so is there another question? I beat you, Mike. Here's the other question.
No, you didn't.
Can you say in the bylaws, though, that the rule can't be suspended?
Absolutely.
And then it can't be.
You could remove the ability of Robert in your bylaws to suspend a rule, and I would suspect, and I would have to really think about this, so I really shouldn't be saying this, but I would suspect that you could adopt a special rule of order that said rules that are in the nature of a rule of order that are in the bylaws could not be suspended.
Whoa, you just blew my mind. Wait.
Mike,
say that last sentence again.
Whoa.
Okay. I would suspect that you could adopt a special, and I was just thinking about this, that you could adopt a special rule of order that said rules of order that are included in the bylaws are not subject to suspension.
Let that sink in.
That would certainly clean things up on the differentiation, that's for sure.
Yes, you could probably do that. It's just like if you wanted to, I'll give you an example. Let me give you another example. You have a main motion, you can have an amendment pending to that motion and a secondary amendment. Mm-hmm. you could adopt a special, you could suspend the rules and have a tertiary amendment to that secondary amendment.
You can?
If you wanted to. You can. You're
Can?
suspending the rules. It takes a 2/3 vote to consider it.
You're totally blowing my mind right now.
I get it. Think about it. You have a main motion, you have an amendment. I'll have to tell you about the Zulus at some point because that was interesting as well. I actually used this example. But you have a main motion, you have an amendment to that main motion, and you have an amendment to that amendment. You may suspend the rules when that amendment to the amendment is pending to, again, amend that secondary amendment.
I gotta pull this. I gotta pull this sometime just to blow people's mind.
Yeah, you could do it. It takes
Wow.
a 2/3 vote to do it.
Yeah.
There are some other things that you can do. And if you remind me when we're off the subject, when you have a few seconds or whenever, I'll tell you the story about the Zulus.
You want to know when that would be useful, though? When you have a main motion and a substitute. Because often you want to go 2 levels of amendment into the substitute, but you can't because the substitute's the first level.
If you can get a 2/3 vote, you can do it. Okay?
I could see that being useful there
You
without
just,
getting too
Karen
crazy.
Ann, you just found a new tool for your favorite topic.
Yeah. You know, I have
Do
2
I have some
favorite topics.
time for do I have some time
Yeah,
for
go right ahead.
Go.
Well, one of my coup d'etats happened to be in a church. And I do a lot of churches as well. And as it happened, in fact, I was just talking about somebody about this case. As it happened, the church has branches in South Africa and had a number of members that were Zulus. And we were explaining to them what was happening in a meeting and to the Zulus. And I use a lot of analogies and cultural references when I teach. That's just how I do it. Okay, and I'm somewhat like you. You do the back and forth, and I enjoy that, and that's very good. Use the Socratic method. I try to do that as well, but I try to find common touchstones so that we can communicate and we can do an explanation.
Sure.
Well, believe it or not too many people in North Philadelphia actually speak is a Zulu.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
See that?
Okay. So
a lot of people in North Philadelphia speak English too.
Well, we know. Spanish is pretty popular, but anyhow, we were being translated, and one of the things that I use to describe how motions work and the idea of the precedence of motions is a game of solitaire.
Okay.
You play the red queen on the black king. Got it? Suddenly you can see how precedent works like that. So like you have a red 10, which is the main motion, and you're playing a black 9 on it, which is the amendment. Okay, that's the kind of analogy. That's just my style of teaching. I found out something very important. Zulus do not play solitaire. So suddenly I'm in this meeting, we're translating this into it, and
they
I
have
am
no
now
idea what you're talking about.
This is an organization that has between $50 and $75 million in assets. Okay? This church. This is for the control of these assets. The people who will be voting on things, I can't effectively, at least I don't think I can effectively communicate. So anyhow, at the end of this, I always do it. I'm just sitting up here going, this is a disaster. This is an absolute disaster. And at the end of this, I say, are there any questions? And an older man stood up. His name was, and I've learned this since then, his name was Billy Koza. And he said, and I do not do a good Zulu accent, so forgive me, I will try to do it. And he said, now tell me, if a main motion is pending and that motion is amended, may then that amendment be amended? Perfectly understanding everything. And I looked at him first and I said, which I did not cover all of this in what I was talking about. So first of all, I looked at him, I said, first of all, you are light years ahead of what I am talking about. Yes, that is a good question. That is an incredibly good question. The answer to your question is yes. that would be considered a secondary amendment. Its scope would be limited to this point. But you can also do other things like suspend the rules and put an amendment into that. You could also technically create a blank in that motion and use a number of, I just saw you blink. So you can use and you can submit a number of possible alternatives. And I found out
very much.
Okay. Well, I found out later that this guy was actually, he had originally been in the ANC with Nelson Mandela.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay, and he didn't like them because they were too communist. This was like back in like 62 or 63.
That's good reason.
Yeah. And it was just.
Am I echoing again?
Mm-hmm.
Pardon?
Fun.
You are.
I'm echoing again, apparently.
Okay. Now, the thing is, we did this for the meeting, and they knew better than the Americans what to do. And I've done them since that time, and it's usually like, just look over and say, all right, you guys know this as well as anybody here that I'm talking about. If you have a question about how to do something, just raise a parliamentary inquiry, and I'll help you through it. But I don't think you're going to need it. It's absolutely amazing. It was one of the best experiences of my professional life.
So could you then suspend the rules? I think I know the answer now, but I'm just like now coming up with all kinds of things just to have fun.
Okay.
So you could suspend the rules then to allow your secondary amendment to go beyond limited to the scope of your First Amendment.
Yes, you could. Well, you can actually propose to suspend the rules to permit a broader amendment than the primary and secondary amendments. Yeah, you need a 2/3 vote. It's basically you're saying I want to substitute at this point for this primary and secondary amendment.
Sorry
and
about
you
that.
normally can
That was
only
a
do a
drive-by
substitute
dog.
as a primary amendment, but you're actually doing the substitute as a secondary amendment.
You could be doing it, yeah.
I love substitutes
Now
if you haven't
got it.
figured that out.
Okay. Now you have got it. This is one of the keys. I like to talk about how flexible parliamentary procedure is. You've just seen how flexible parliamentary procedure is.
I'm going to have fun at some point.
Uh-oh.
I don't know when,
Uh-oh.
but I'm going to.
Now we're in trouble.
But you know me, I'm just hunting because I want to do this once in my career. I want to have a rescind and expunge from the minutes. Oh my God, I've been just dreaming of it.
Well, no, I'll tell you how to do it, Karen Ann. At the next meeting of the LNC, you move to suspend the rules to have you not take the minutes, assign it to your latest persecutor. We're not going to name her name. So that she can do it. And then afterwards, you move to rescind and expunge from those minutes anything that's a problem.
Actually, you could send it to a committee. In fact, the current NP, I noticed that you were talking about this earlier. The current NP actually does say, you know what, you have to. The only way, you can't vote against the minutes, but you can do things like postpone them until the next meeting.
Right.
You can, within a quarterly time period, you can send them to a committee.
Right.
I have a real problem telling the assembly that they have to do something when a majority refuses to do it as well. So that's largely because I don't know how you get around that.
Yeah, that whole recent discussion, but with Ms. Adams saying, oh, I'm going to ask the chair to say how, really? Oh.
Yeah, I know, you don't have to go there. I know.
Let me tell you, the bitch in me is going to be like, ooh, I can't wait for your next convention committee report, sister. But I'm not going to.
Oh, why not?
Because I believe in the golden rule.
Well, just move to suspend the rules to require this other person to serve as, secretary for the session. Go ahead.
Nah, I like
That's a polite way of saying, let's see you do better, bitch.
Yeah.
But it's just nutty,
yeah,
nutty.
I like doing that too, but yeah, I like being secretary. I'm secretary of my local parliamentary.
Yeah,
university.
it's a weird fetish, but you know.
Yeah, yeah, but I enjoy it. The best job I thought of the state organization was serving as
Yeah,
secretary.
I like doing it. It's kind of like treasurer. You either like it or you hate it. And like me, I'd rather just eat my own foot out of a bear trap than be a treasurer. And I've been a treasurer.
Yes.
No, thank you.
Yes.
Because I've
I've
been
been when I could put up with it.
It's awful. Okay, the coup d'etat now. I got this article.
Okay.
I wanted to pull this up though, because there's something very interesting in here that I wanted to bring up because I know some people might be concerned. And that is that last wait, hold on. Oh, the why a coup one. The one that says it's through appropriate procedural means. And why I like that paragraph because that's what distinguishes what you're talking about here from what happened in New Hampshire. Because what they did in New Hampshire wasn't through appropriate procedural means.
Well, close.
No, not even close. So you're so let me ask you though, because this is also coming up in and we're going to discuss this. What this also, hold on, I'm like need to find my little buttons here. With this also wrong thing. Yeah. Well, hold on, I got that.
That's what she said.
So, this also reminds me, though, of where everyone's getting real ass mad about what the Mises Caucus is saying, where the Mises says they're taking over the party. But the kind of takeover they're talking about is the kind you're taking over here. They're talking about winning at convention. It's the appropriate procedural means.
Doing it right.
Right.
Yeah.
And isn't that what everyone tries to do? I mean, even, it might not be as broad as something you'd call a coup, but it might even just be on a small issue, like you said here. Like the plotting I did to close the back door, I laid a lot of groundwork for that. I did backroom deals for that. Mm-hmm. They were appropriate.
Yeah, it wasn't
I think you are correct in that.
Well, no, what I did, Mike, with the chair of the bylaws committee, where I said I won't speak against your motion if you at least allow this to be heard.
Yeah, that's just good old fashioned horse trading.
Yeah,
but but sometimes I have to say I like to use the analogy of a coup as part of a melodrama, and I like the drama associated with it. I actually did a presentation, and I'm surprised they let me do this for the National Convention. But you can ask Richard Brown about this because he was there. And what happened was when it started, they began to introduce me, and they said our next speaker does not need any introduction. You suddenly heard a siren going off, the door being kicked open, and I walked in wearing my black beret, an army jacket, black gloves, a neckerchief, and said, "For those of you who do not know me, I am Jonathan Jacobs, and I'm out here to talk to you today about parliamentary coup d'etats." They look nothing like this.
Wait a second. Was that actual intro music, or was it just a coincidence?
No, it was actually, I arranged for a siren to go off. I had a little
siren. Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, and I remember Richard Brown just looked at me afterwards and said, "God, what an entrance." But I did that to give the idea of the shock, and to give the idea of that sometimes people think when you're talking about a coup, this is what it is. You barely will hear a peep out of me during a coup. One of the ones where I was actually physically present and was there, I didn't do anything but whisper. That's it.
It was a whispering campaign.
Well, it wasn't. You were at virtually through my video at our Colorado convention, and that was very well organized, and had delegates in place to vote for the things that we wanted. And there was something here, though, also in your article that reminded me of the Colorado one, where let me remove the frames. 1 second. Crap. Right.
I wish I had an actual PDF of the copy of it. That's my draft. And by the way, everything that you're reading in there is based on a real life example that I think I've been involved with all of them. Some of them I've read about on the internet, and it's just repeated a few times, but I think all of them are out there.
This paragraph here is what reminded me of Colorado when you said, the last paragraph may sound like a working definition of overall parliamentary principles, so the question may be asked, why would a coup be necessary? The answer is, while the plotters may be willing to follow the rules, the regime in power, inclusive of the chair, may not be. And that's what happened in Colorado. They were constantly, they weren't following our rules the way the bylaws committee wasn't following the rules, and the agenda, everything was screwed up. So we followed everything by the rules, and some people still got really, really mad though and thought we pulled something. But the funny thing is, by
the way, agenda is a rule in the nature of a rule of order.
Yeah, right. I mean, and we got the delegates, but the funny
we just
thing
made sure
is,
they followed the dang procedures.
Yeah, the funny thing is, our quote unquote plotting was all done right out in the open. We wrote to the board ahead of time and said, look, this is what we're going to move. Maybe we can work this out. And they were just like, no, we're not going to work with you. So
we did it anyway.
But I would say, in some sense, I would have called that a coup.
You probably, I mean, you probably depend, it just depends on your orientation. And
well, we got a whole new board.
Yeah.
Except for one
pretty
person.
Much.
Well, I can give you one example where it was that nominating convention. There are all sorts of nominating conventions all over the place, so I don't have to talk to anything about it. There was a chair of one of the local political parties that was part of this nominating convention, and he basically said, "Our bylaws say I could get to appoint delegates," and he kept on saying in the press, if you check our bylaws, you'll see that I can appoint the delegates. Well, they handed me a copy of the bylaws and it didn't say anything of the sort. So the coup there was me instructing some of the candidate's supporters how to raise points of order to prevent him from doing this. The meeting is still somewhat legendary. This was like 20 years ago. The meeting was still somewhat legendary. That's basically, now that was a coup d'etat. It was a contentious meeting, but it was done within the rules and it was done in accordance, to make sure that the chairman abided by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Is there such a, I'm probably even going to word this because wrong. Because I saw you had the coup master there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a contra coup master? Like somebody who's assisting the members?
Yeah, it's called a parliamentarian.
I'm sorry?
Called a parliamentarian. If you want a contra coup master, the coup master assists the members.
Right.
And they're designated leaders. If there's somebody there who wants to stop the coup, it's generally the parliamentarian held or hired by the chair. If they can actually convince somebody to take that position, and if they can convince somebody professional that this is not a violation of the rules.
I think in a little bit of a twist, not exactly the same way, I almost functioned as the contra coup master, but for the members. Let me give you a situation that happened in California a couple of years ago. The chair wasn't being malicious. She was acting in good faith. She was just wrong. And but the platform committee knew damn well what it's doing. And they, contrary to their bylaws, deleted their entire platform and replaced it in like one step when the bylaws said they had to do it plank by plank. And the chair got confused or whatever. I wasn't a member of that assembly, but I ended up advising them. I was there, so I was advising the members on how to fight it.
Okay.
And then I ended up helping them write an appeal to the Judicial Committee.
Okay. By the way, that would have been a rule in the nature of a rule of order. Did I just blow your mind again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Whether or not something shall be taken in gross or one piece at a time deals with a transaction of business within a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And is not required to be in the bylaws.
I don't
So it would have
remember.
taken a two-thirds vote.
I know
An
they didn't
objection
try to.
would have been enough.
They didn't try to suspend the rules, though.
You know, they probably didn't have the votes, but an objection to it at the time without a two-thirds vote should have been enough to kill it.
Yeah, what happened is, as often happens, and this is what we ended up winning on the JC with, is the members aren't as parliamentary wise sometimes as the people on the dais and the platform committee.
No.
So they didn't know how to properly object. So we found in the record something which the chair should have taken as a point of order. They didn't use those words, but it was obvious what they were trying to say.
Okay.
And that's what the Judicial Committee found persuasive, was
Okay.
that obviously that the members were attempting to raise a point of order, they just didn't know how to do it.
Okay. That would be a possibility. Somebody saying, I object, might be raising a point of order by somebody who doesn't understand how to properly raise a point
Right.
of order.
And I do think and I do think Robert says this as well, it's the job of the chair to help the members do what they want to do.
Yes, incredibly so. That would be the kind of thing if I were chairing the meeting and I were not being hired by one side or the other to do. Well, I wouldn't take a job where I was hired. If I'm chairing, I'm chairing. That's it.
Right.
But if I'm chairing the meeting and somebody would want to do that, I would probably say, and in fact, I have said this, are you raising a point of order against this action? Do you wish to raise this as a point of order? Please phrase it as a point of order if this is what you want to do. And then I would say, point of order is well taken or not well taken. Usually, if it is possible, I will say the point of order is not well taken. The decision of the chair is subject to appeal.
Yeah. I try to
You
do
don't
that
have to
as
say
well.
that. I do.
Right.
I do.
Right. Because I do think it's the job of the chair to help facilitate what the members wish to do. And in this circumstance, I just want to be really clear, because the California chair's a great friend of mine. There was absolutely nothing nefarious going on. You know, shit happens sometimes. I mean, shit just happens.
Oh yeah.
We both know her. She's
Yeah, no,
she's not
she's a
one
sweetheart.
to play those
Yeah,
games.
no, I mean, I make mistakes all the time.
Yeah. Well, and
Well, this
libertarians
was,
are hard to control. It's difficult to chair libertarians.
Yes, it is.
No more so than the U.S. Senate. So,
Well, yeah, I can imagine. But
yes.
for an organization where we're all supposedly on the same side, it just
We're not.
seems like, well, we are, but it's the opposition.
Not when it comes to this stuff.
I think, though, delegates to a convention, whether they realize it or not, are always actively plotting against the chair. They're trying to make the chair's life hell. Libertarians just do that. You've seen enough national conventions to know that, Mike. It's like,
Yeah.
Not
Nick was the
necessarily.
But on the other hand, sometimes it's also self-inflicted by the chair.
yeah, but
Yeah.
still, I think libertarians just love creating chaos.
I know in St. Louis it was self-inflicted by the chair.
Nick is the only one I've seen that. Because when did Naked Dancing Man happen? When Nick left. Nick wasn't on stage when that happened. Nick was doing an interview.
He went to the bathroom.
Well, that was the temporary chair was in the bathroom. That was Bill Redpath. No, that was
Okay.
Jim Lark. Nick was
Okay.
doing an interview with CNN. Jim Lark's like, nothing's happening. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then all hell broke loose. So, all right. So, what else is in here that's very like to take away from this article? So I see faction parliamentarian. I love combat parliamentarian. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, I didn't invent the term combat parliamentarian, but it is out there.
So you said
that conjures up
it's-
visions of a parliamentarian with a gavel in one hand and a katana in the other.
Yeah, well,
So you
that's
said-
me walking. That's me walking in wearing the beret. So that's.
Yeah.
I actually do wear a beret. I mean, I've been known to wear a beret with evening dress. So I do wear a beret most of the time, especially in winter.
So you would say it says a combat parliamentarian's role is participatory rather than advisory.
Well, I didn't say it. Kronstadt said it. He was the guy.
Okay. So
I
this
don't
is
agree with it entirely.
You don't? Why don't? So if it's a member of the
Because it's not
organization.
necessarily a member. It's not necessarily a member.
Oh, that would be bad then.
Yeah. So I'm not, when I'm doing something, I don't have an opinion on the issue. I might not understand the issue, but that's why they do understand that I really don't have a dog in the hunt, as it were, to determine what, and oftentimes I don't have a dog in the hunt when I'm dealing with dog clubs, to determine what's, to really be participatory in that respect. And I know that there are major issues with certain subjects in dog clubs, and I really don't have an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Breed standards come to mind.
Yes.
But if the person was a parliamentarian and a member of the society, then would you see an issue with the participatory?
No, I wouldn't. If he really wanted to, he just might be somebody indifferent and saying, these side are my friends, I'm going to help them. So he might not be overall participatory.
But doesn't that kind of go against what Roberts advises for impartiality, though?
I was going to say, is there an ethical issue?
If you're acting as a parliamentarian, yes. If you're acting as a very skilled member of an organization, no. Mm-hmm. If that's the area that you're talking about with ethics.
Yeah. But what
if you're talking about, is it ethical to stage a coup? My argument is yes.
But say you're a member and you're a parliamentarian, but you're there as a member, but you can't shed completely the fact that you're also a parliamentarian, and other members will be coming to you asking you for advice, knowing that you're a parliamentarian. Does that blur the ethical lines?
Not that I could tell. If you give them advice, which is going to be one of the things, and you have to read through that article as well. If you give them advice, you have to give them honest advice. Right. You do have that requirement to give honest advice. You
can't tell them to do something that you know is going to fuck them up.
Right.
You gotta follow the rules.
You do not have an obligation, if you are not the parliamentarian, to tell them a bloody thing. That actually, we talk about this. I think a few pages down. Believe it or not, I actually haven't read this article in about 5 years. So I'm doing all of this from memory.
Yeah. Well, here's something interesting. This reminds me of Pennsylvania. Point 5. Sometimes the plotters will assume that some procedurally correct action taken by the regime in power is a violation. Boy, did I have that situation where they could suspend a certain rule, but they didn't, and there was nothing wrong with that. They were perfectly entitled to not suspend it.
I'm in that situation a lot. I won't go into details because it's active.
Right.
But there are times when you have to say, no, this is okay, or no, this isn't okay. Doesn't make any difference what you did or what you think you shouldn't have done. You still have to do it this way. And you have to do that. You have to tell people that's part of you serving. Now, if they don't like that, and I've had a few clients who didn't like that, I've said, well, you know what? Very simple. I will be more than happy to tear up the contract after you pay me for the work I've done, and you can find somebody else. And when I go into some of these situations as well, on my actual letter of agreement, you didn't sign one because it deals with payment and everything. It actually says I am bound by the NAP-AIP Joint Code of Professional Conduct. So now, even if I'm doing a coup, I'm still bound by that.
But wouldn't you agree on this, which I'm pretty sure you would, I mean, because I would always say this, part of the problem is here, even if you do everything right, you're following the rules, this should be pretty much a last resort, because the fact is, unless you think these people are going to leave the organization, they're going to lie in wait for you, and they're going to get even eventually. That these kinds of strategies tend to, I don't know, you end up with a Hatfields and McCoys.
I don't know. It's not been my experience that they have. I can say that.
Libertarians hold grudges longer than an elephant.
But I can tell you in some other things, they do not. Alliances tend to shift. And in some cases, it just goes off where it's no longer an issue.
Interesting. Because I always would be like, this really, you need to be desperate because I don't know. People don't like being defeated badly.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they simply cannot recover from it.
It's like what happened in New Hampshire, not the New Hampshire coup, the bad one, but like when Nick lost to Noda. I'm like, I felt bad, and I'm like, don't humiliate people. When you humiliate people, you give them a grudge to
Ammunition.
nurse for over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and they generally will get even, and it's not pretty. You should always allow people some dignity.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
it depends. I've seen it occasionally, certainly in political areas. Either the guy will come back and try to do something else, not necessarily within the organization, or the guy will retire, or the people will leave the organization.
Well,
They'll be
for
they'll
instance, when we were there's been
yeah.
plenty of times in the past where I've been on the LNC where they want to try to suspend the chair. And
Mm-hmm.
the advice myself and other people always give them is if you're going to take a shot at the king, be sure you kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the people who are trying to suspend me are learning that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not, you don't leave, if you're really going to try to get rid of somebody, you better make sure you can do it.
Well, there are people in the LPCU who tried that with me, and look what happened.
Yeah, so I don't know, these things that it's yes, somebody said this right in chat here. Win with grace, or the people whose nose you tweak will come back at you.
Sometimes I can say that is not the case. Well, I have seen it now in the ones that I've been involved with. When we're doing something like this, generally they win.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are at least in the article are the ones where they win. In the few cases where they didn't, I think it was basically, there was one that I remember, and I kind of alluded to it, where the chair did everything correctly. The chair was acting appropriately. He didn't violate any rules in what he was doing. And he won. And the people that were paying me didn't win. And as far as I know, nothing happened to them, but the guy continued to be chair, and they just didn't want to be involved with the organization anymore. I've seen a lot of that where people will retire. They retire to write books.
We've had a few of that in the LP too.
Well, we just in New Hampshire thing where that illegitimate coup failed, a bunch of people did resign the party, but that's because they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, like illegitimately.
Mm-hmm.
There's something
Well,
else.
even in Colorado, there's been some cases where they get pissed because their desired person didn't win, so they said, "I'm out of here."
Or they say they're going to leave and they don't.
Yeah.
I like this paragraph because this came up in Colorado too. The reason to control the agenda is to control the timing of events.
Yes, it is.
We threw them off when we got our agenda passed. But the funny thing is, it wasn't secret. We sent it to them the day before.
Yeah.
We had copies of it out on the table for everybody to read.
You would be
I
surprised.
know, because I put them there.
You would be surprised at the number of people who think the chair establishes an agenda. It is the chair's, this is what they think. It is the chair's prerogative to write the agenda. If he says something can be brought up, it can be. If he doesn't, it can't. That is a load of bull under Robert.
But
There's no such bull.
You do mention it in here, though, that there is I call it like a home field advantage with the chair. The chair carries a certain gravitas where people tend to defer.
Yeah.
Unless you get a bunch of new people at convention. They weren't terribly new. I mean, they met our seasoning requirements, but that was probably their first convention and didn't have respect for nobody. So that kind of was part of what happened in ours. But
I can think of one case where the victim was a clergyman, where the person was changing the party that was my group was going after was a clergyman, and the guy where the motion was actually put from the floor. And you're familiar with that ability.
Yeah.
But where the motion was put from the floor was actually a special master appointed by the court.
Dang.
Yeah. And we won the day.
And here's, I like these paragraphs here. So much of this is applicable to the LP, where you talk about stacking.
Mm-hmm.
So to have enough new members, but also point 5 here on page 8, the plotters should select a floor leader that's capable of making motions and presiding under pressure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a whip, a floor whip.
More actually of a floor leader.
Okay.
You can think of it as being somebody like a majority or minority leader in a governmental body. A whip primarily makes sure that you have the votes. The floor leader is the person who makes the actual motions.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
having done both. Yeah, having done both for the California delegation, that's a correct distinction. In my case, when I was the whip, it wasn't a case of making sure that a position had the vote. I was making sure that everybody in the delegation actually did vote.
Yeah.
I didn't care what they were voting on. It's like I had to herd 10% of the convention, so that was a lot of cats.
Mm-hmm.
But most of what this seems to me, at least when it comes to a convention, is just knowing what you want and being very organized.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot of it, but a lot of it is also not to be intimidated and to know what the rules are.
Yeah.
You would be surprised how many people, just because you have somebody in the chair, will automatically follow what they do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I was worried about, and the Zulus did not disappoint me did disappoint. I will say they disappointed me, but they disappointed me in a good way when they did this, was I was very worried about people following the chair simply because it was the chair. There has been a history, or there was at least at that point in South Africa, of the person at the head of the meeting runs the meeting, is in charge, and you do whatever he says. And that was the culture that they came in on. Well, I'll tell you what, they broke those cultural bands. If that was the culture, it was not Zulu culture, because they didn't do that. I was so pleased.
I don't think that's Zulu culture. I think it's a human nature to want to defer to someone in authority, which is also it's an easy way out instead of doing the work to say, hey, what they're doing is right or wrong, and here's why, and standing up and possibly being a target, but also at the same time standing up for what's right.
Mm-hmm.
We see that way too much in this country right now.
Mike, I'd say it's human nature in a circumstance where there's rules they're not familiar with. And for you and me, that's why we got familiar with Roberts, because we've been in that situation where we're like, we don't know what the hell is going on here.
We got sick of being the moles in the whack-a-mole and decided to become the hammer.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I love this here. It says the clients ask only two types of questions. How do we do this, and did we do this right? And I love according to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly, to me, the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, if you want to be a parliamentarian, that has to be your answer. If you don't want to do it, you want to advertise yourself as something else and not be a credentialed parliamentarian, then you have to do it that way. There's just no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, it's a good thing I'm a hard deontologist, because I'm like, what's right is right. You can't.
Mm-hmm. You may not like it, but that's perfectly valid.
Is there anything else? Like, did I point out like all the good stuff here? Is there anything else you would like to point out here?
Yeah, if you take a look at the last couple of paragraphs, I like to compare doing a coup d'etat to Oz with a parliamentarian.
Okay, I got that up here.
Yeah, you have that up there. Just leave it right there. And because I like to say a good coup master is ultimately like the wizard in The Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the curtain. Because the people that are doing this, especially if the person is not a member, are the members themselves. You have to empower them. You can tell them what to do, but they have to be the ones to do it.
Oh, I love that last sentence.
You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Yeah.
Well,
last
you might
sentence
be able to lead them to water, but you can't drink for them.
Right.
So
the coup master merely explains to the plotters how to do something they already could do.
Yeah. Click your heel 3 times and you can go home.
To which Dorothy
That's,
said, "Why'd you tell me that in the first place?"
yeah, I've often wondered that. I've shot the entire movie, but and ironically, I was actually at the hometown of L. Frank Baum during at one of the conference or one of my recertifications that I went to. I, by complete accident, after writing this, stumbled onto the hometown of L. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz.
Oops, wrong thing. What'd I do wrong? Okay, hold on. I'm such a
And that was completely just by happenstance. And I thought about this. I had a friend who's another parliamentarian who he loves The Wizard of Oz. And so I got him a few things and I mailed them out to him and said, I know you love this stuff, so here.
Well, my hometown in Indiana does the Wizard of Oz festival every year, and they've been doing it forever. And I was just out there last week actually, and I finally picked up the local Wizard of Oz festival poster that I've been trying to find for the past 25 years.
Okay.
It's off camera, but I'm sitting here going, okay, they have something to understand that if she had the power to go along, what took her so long?
Yeah.
Why go through all this MacGuffin with the Yellow Brick Road, the Flying Monkeys, the Wicked Witch of the West, the Mop Bucket, all the other characters? What was the point of all that? The answer was the whole thing was a giant concussion delusion.
Yes. Well, these aren't concussion delusions per se, but a lot of times to get to where they were, they could have been solved in one meeting. I had one of my clients who was in a coup after it was with the church that had between $50 and $75 million. The client came up to me after this meeting, or after a couple of months after this, and I ran into him and he said, we should have hired you 2 years ago. Before they did this, they actually could have probably settled it without court. And I've actually gone back and done them on at least one occasion when it was not a controversial meeting. They just needed somebody to serve as a parliamentarian. And it was quite funny because I'll tell you another story. 2 stories about that. First of all, I came in there and some of the people from the old one suddenly said, "Oh my God, what's he doing here?" Because they thought something. Yeah.
That's the type of response you want to get.
Yes. I'm like, no, this is peaceful. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And then the other one was, it just happened last night. I am looking for legal counsel who is licensed in the District of Columbia, because my client has some interests in a thing in the District of Columbia. It's also where NAP is incorporated. It's also where the president of NAP, Darlene Allen, is located. So we're friends on Facebook, and I met her as well in person. And I typed out a message, and it was like, do you know anybody who handles nonprofit law, nonprofit corporate law in the District of Columbia? And she wrote me back and said, "You're scaring me."
Uh-oh.
I said, no, this means honest. We're not doing anything because of the meeting is coming up. Yeah, but you do get those kind of things, and I'm still in the process of looking for somebody, but yeah. But those are the kind of things that do happen when you do this enough. I do have the reputation. People do kind of look at me like, uh-oh.
That's the type of reception you want, because it's earned by what you do, how you do it, and it's respect, even if there is a little bit of cowardness. I want to have that case where I walk into a convention or meeting and they say, "Oh shit, Seebeck's here."
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah, I had a little bit in California, getting it back in Colorado, but that is the ultimate compliment, because you're like, okay, that means that I'm doing something right.
Yeah. But no, that you're correct. That does happen. It happened actually at an NEP convention when I got the floor and moved to do something, and I thought, now everybody is going to hate me, and everybody afterward came up and said, "Well, I'll tell you the story some other time." But that was fun. So
well,
go ahead.
It's been a couple hours. I think we're going to wrap it up, but we're probably going to have you on again, because there's a bunch of articles I'd love to talk about.
It has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it, and
I actually think that second article is going to be useful to a lot of people, and I'm going to send it to some friends of mine as they're planning for convention. I really liked that it kept do the right thing, ethics top of the list, because that's so important.
It is.
All right, everyone. So we're gonna head on off, and we'll see you over the weekend. We're getting together Sunday, Mike.
No, can't do it.
Oh,
We're in the middle of. Well, we're going in the middle of mad scramble on getting John ready for college.
Okay.
He's going to be on campus in 2 weeks.
Run this.
Well, and I'm in California the next week, so maybe a nighttime or something.
We're going to be in Illinois that weekend because that's when he has to be on campus moved in. So that's not a problem.
We're going to be behind a little. We'll talk about it. I don't want to.
And yes, I will say this: my son is going to be a gargoyle. That is the Bradley mascot.
Like his. Never mind. I was going to make a joke, but I'm just going to.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
All right, everyone. You have a good night, and thank you so much, JJ.
Thank you.
Thank you, JJ.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Fever! Let's hear the opposition side. Like a stubborn donkey's bray. All opposed? You say nay. Opposed! Opposed! The motion carries anyway.